Welcome to This Explainer. Imagine waking up in the middle of July. You're expecting warm sunshine, right? But instead, you look out the window and the sky is just pitch black. The air is absolutely freezing. You step outside and instead of a nice summer breeze, you're hit with this terrifying historical anomaly. It is literally snowing. So today, we're unraveling one of the most chilling, mysterious events in human history, a time when the whole world was suddenly plunged into unexplained darkness.
Okay, let's dive into this. The conditions in 1816 were, well, completely bewildering. People across the globe were absolutely terrified. I mean, daytime skies were so dark, you literally couldn't see the sun. Rivers, springs, lakes that should have been flowing freely in the warm months, frozen solid. There are actual reports of birds just dropping dead right out of the sky because they couldn't survive the sudden unnatural cold. And in places like New England, Canada, and all across Europe, heavy snow was just dumping down right in the middle of July.
You really have to put yourself in the shoes of the people living through this. This sudden plunge to sub-zero temperatures wiped out lush-growing crops almost overnight. And remember, they didn't have the internet, no TVs, no telegraphs. They had absolutely no way of knowing what was happening globally. So in that complete vacuum of information, widespread panic set in fast. Many people genuinely assumed the sun had just died, or that it was the end of the world, or maybe they were facing divine punishment for their sins. But as we'll see, the real culprit wasn't up in the sky at all.
Part 1. The Eruption of Tambora, April 10, 1815.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that to find the actual cause of this global nightmare, we have to look thousands of miles away, to the Indonesian island of Sumbawa. For centuries, Mount Tambora was just this sleeping giant, towering 4,300 meters high. People farmed, they fished, they lived totally happy lives in its shadow. But when it finally woke up on April 10, 1815, it unleashed the most powerful volcanic blast in 10,000 years of human history. The explosion was so violently loud, heard a staggering 2,600 kilometers away, that British military officers stationed far off actually started prepping their cannons. They genuinely assumed they were under attack by the world's loudest fleet of pirates.
The destruction, it was instantaneous and absolute. The sky turned completely black, raining fire and smoldering rocks. Out of the mountain roared what's called a pyroclastic flow. It's this lethal, fast-moving river of hot gas and ash, moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour, with temperatures soaring over 1,000 degrees Celsius. This deadly flow wiped out the entire Tambora kingdom in a flash. No one even had a second to run. And as if that wasn't horrific enough, the sheer force of the blast and the collapsing mountain triggered massive tsunamis that drowned the surrounding islands. When the smoke finally cleared days later, the landscape was completely unrecognizable. That majestic 4,300-meter peak had literally vanished. In its place was this massive, gaping caldera, a crater 6 kilometers wide and a full kilometer deep. But here's the most terrifying part of this whole event. The real global killer wasn't the lava, the blast, or even those tsunamis. The lava actually stayed relatively close to the mountain. The true instrument of global destruction was totally invisible, and it was heading straight up into the sky.
Part 2. The Science of Cooling, the Invisible Enemy in the Stratosphere.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because you're probably wondering, how exactly does a volcano in Indonesia cause it to snow in North America in the middle of summer? Well, it's all about atmospheric chemistry. Using data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we can break down exactly how this eruption triggered a global deep freeze. First, the blast injected hundreds of millions of tons of ash and sulfur dioxide gas straight up into the stratosphere. That's about 50 kilometers above the Earth. Second, once it got up there, this gas reacted with water vapor to form sulfate aerosols. Third, these aerosols are incredible because they act just like billions of microscopic mirrors. And fourth, as a result, these tiny mirrors reflected incoming sunlight and thermal radiation right back out into space. It essentially formed an invisible blanket that just blocked the sun's heat from reaching the Earth. And this brilliantly illustrates the core problem. You see, the stratosphere has very low turbulence. When something gets up there, it doesn't just easily blow away or fall back down. These microscopic particles were trapped, spreading rapidly across the entire northern hemisphere. It was exactly like turning on the Earth's air conditioning on full blast, but losing the remote to turn it off. The planet just kept getting colder and colder and colder.
Part 3. Global Chaos and Famine, the Domino Effect of 1816.
While the science of the stratosphere is super fascinating,
The reality on the ground was just a tragedy of epic proportions. As this invisible sulfur blanket blotted out the sun across the northern hemisphere, humanity was pushed to the absolute brink. The ancient, unforgiving rules of economics took hold almost immediately. Because it was freezing in the summer, the seeds farmers planted simply wouldn't grow. Harvests completely failed. With the food supply vanishing, the prices for basic necessities, like rice and flour, absolutely skyrocketed, putting them way out of reach for ordinary people. What followed was horribly inevitable. Mass starvation led to desperate looting, violent riots, and the rapid spread of diseases across towns and cities all over Europe and America. Every single day was just a fight to survive.
And the recovery was agonizingly slow. Let's look at the timeline here. 1815 was the eruption itself. 1816 brought the devastating year without a summer. By 1817, gravity finally started to win the battle, slowly pulling those microscopic sulfur and ash particles back down to Earth, which gave a slight improvement in the weather. During 1818 and 1819, sunlight truly began to pierce through the atmosphere again, and crops finally started to grow back. But it wasn't until 1820, 5 full years after the eruption, that global temperatures fully recovered to normal levels.
Part 4. What if it happened today? Humanity's illusion of control.
You know, looking back at an event from over 200 years ago, it's pretty easy to feel detached from it. We've got advanced technology, global networks, incredible scientific monitoring. But we really have to ask ourselves a serious question. If a Tambora-level event happened tomorrow, is our highly advanced technology-driven society actually any safer? Consider the tragic irony in how we process information. In 1816, the horror was amplified by an information deficit. People panicked locally because they literally didn't know a volcano had erupted half a world away. Today, we face the exact opposite danger: information overload. The moment the sky turned black, social media would immediately act as a massive catalyst for global panic. Fake news, conspiracy theories, and absolute hysteria would spread way faster than the ash cloud itself, potentially causing as much societal breakdown as the weather.
So, the crucial point is that our modern world is uniquely vulnerable in ways 1816 never was. A modern volcanic winter wouldn't just freeze crops. That high-altitude ash acts literally like liquid glass inside jet engines, meaning global aviation networks would instantly freeze up. Millions of people would be stranded worldwide. Without air freight, international supply chains would collapse overnight. Stock markets would crash in the ensuing panic, wiping out millions of jobs. And severe food shortages? They trigger modern unrest on an absolutely unprecedented scale.
And if you're sitting there thinking the threat to aviation is just theoretical, we actually have a terrifying precedent. Consider British Airways Flight 009. While flying near Jakarta, the aircraft unknowingly flew into a relatively small cloud of volcanic ash. Within minutes, all 4 engines completely failed. Now, the pilots did miraculously manage to restart the engines after descending out of the ash, but the incident proved something important. It permanently categorized volcanic ash as a lethal threat to modern aviation. Just imagine thousands of planes grounded simultaneously across the globe. Which brings us right back to the source of the nightmare itself. The Global Volcanism Program provides a very chilling warning for us. Mount Tambora is not dead. It is firmly classified as an active stratovolcano. It isn't gone, it's just resting, quietly gathering its strength deep underground. In fact, its last recorded eruption was as recent as 1967. But it's the recent data that's really the most alarming part. According to the source material analyzing the volcano's timeline, in March 2026, new seismicity and increasing underground pressure have been detected beneath Tambora. The sleeping giant is stirring, basically reminding us that those immense geological forces that completely shattered the world in 1815 are still very much alive and active right beneath the surface.
We love to build complex plans, economies, and technologies. It gives us this comfortable illusion of absolute control over our environment. But nature operates entirely on its own timeline, totally indifferent to human progress. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. When will Tambora's boiling magma cross that limit once again? And when that unstoppable force finally bursts through, are we truly prepared for the next year without a summer?